So what is the absolute hardest, most strategic skill in the entire customer experience toolkit? Let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking Damolari Ojalea's framework on CX excellence, and we're zeroing in on a word that gets thrown around constantly, but is almost never actually understood. Yep, we're talking about compassion. Let's start with what we call the compassion gap. Picture two totally identical resolutions. Over here on the left, an agent efficiently processes a refund, they hit their handle time, and they close the ticket. Boom, problem solved, right? But on the right, the agent does all of that. Plus, they notice the customer sounds completely exhausted. They acknowledge it, they make that person feel seen. Look, both interactions are technically resolved, but only the compassionate one builds actual, lasting customer loyalty. That efficient refund, forgotten by tomorrow. The compassionate one, remembered forever.
Which brings us to Section 1, the compassion gap.
To really understand the stakes here, just look at this stat. A recent Salesforce study found that 84% of customers say the experience a company provides is literally just as important as its products or services. 84%! Yet, think about standard CX training for a second. We pour money into product knowledge, system navigation, and scripts, but we almost entirely ignore human connection. We are leaving the single most important metric right there on the table.
All right, moving on to Section 2, empathy versus compassion.
Now, there is a massive difference between these two concepts. Empathy basically says, I understand what you're feeling, and hey, that's important, but it's totally passive. You can understand someone's pain and still do absolutely nothing about it. Compassion, on the other hand, says, I understand what you're feeling, and I'm committed to actually doing something about it. It's empathy in motion, you know? It adds that crucial motivational layer to take real action.
To really nail this, we have to unlearn everything we think compassion is. It's not sympathy, it's not feeling sorry for someone or pity, and it is definitely not emotional softness or just unlimited tolerance. True compassion includes setting firm boundaries, but doing it with dignity. It's a rigorous, highly professional capacity. Honestly, it takes real strength.
And we can actually ground this in hard science. Research led by Dr. Tanya Singer at the Max Planck Institute reveals something super fascinating. You know that totally drained feeling after a long shift? Well, empathic distress, which is just feeling what another person feels, that actually causes burnout. But genuine, active compassion, that fires up the brain's action orientation and reward systems. It literally acts as a protective shield against emotional exhaustion. So if you're wiped out after a shift, you might just be practicing empathic distress, not compassion. Let's break this down further in Section 3, the 5 dimensions of compassion. Dimension 1 is emotional awareness. This is all about accurately reading beneath the surface of a customer's words. When someone yells, "This is ridiculous," the surface emotion is obviously frustration. But emotional awareness means you're actively decoding the situation. Are they actually feeling fear over a financial hit, or maybe a total loss of trust because they've been let down by your brand before? Then we have Dimension 2, active listening. And I mean true active listening here. This requires you to completely suspend your own internal agenda, your urge to instantly fix the problem, and your handle time anxiety. You have to temporarily drop your focus on the solution so you can actually hear the gap between their stated issue and their emotional reality. You're basically listening for what is not being said. Dimension 3 is perspective taking. This is where you zoom out and construct a mental model of the customer's constraints. You're asking yourself, how is their history with our brand or even their cultural background shaping this specific call? If this is their 4th time calling about the same issue, how is that past failure fueling the anger you're hearing right now? Next up is emotional regulation. This means managing your own feelings during tough interactions without either suppressing them entirely or retreating into this sort of protective detachment. We've all seen how years on the front line can cause a hardening, and while that might feel like professionalism to you, trust me, it comes across as straight-up coldness to your customers. And the final one, Dimension 5, is compassionate action. This step requires actual courage. It's about translating all that awareness we just talked about into concrete responses. Sometimes prioritizing a customer's genuine well-being means you have to go off script. It might mean escalating a systemic issue that's actively hurting people, even if it feels way above your pay grade. So, how do we apply this? Let's look at Section 4, Compassion in Action. This adapted quote from Maya Angelou really hits the nail on the head. Customers can always tell the difference between someone who is trained to care and someone who actually does. Scripted empathy, like robotically saying, I understand your frustration just because it's printed in your manual, it just feels hollow. It's performative and it's completely unconvincing to the people we're trying to help.
Building genuine compassion requires some structured habits across 3 temporal zones. First, pre-interaction. This is about priming yourself before a shift with an intention reset so you aren't dragging your commute stress right to the desk. Second is in-interaction. Maintain your space by taking just a 3-second pause before you respond to a really tough statement. And third, post-interaction. Do a quick 90-second debrief to process what just happened, rather than just burying it and jumping straight into the next call. Of course, this isn't easy. That brings us to Section 5, surviving the pressure.
You have to actively put your guard up against what we call the 4 compassion killers. First, volume pressure, where urgency just totally overrides care. Then, repeated difficulty. That's when your 11th angry customer starts feeling like a massive burden. Third is personal depletion, meaning you're just physically or emotionally tapped out. And finally, perceived bad faith, which happens when you assume a customer is just being manipulative. If left unchecked, these killers will absolutely crush your emotional responsiveness. You have to recognize them if you want to fight them.
When you're under that kind of pressure, you're going to face angry customers. But try this reframe for tactical de-escalation. Respond to the desperation, not the threat. If a customer threatens to blast your company on social media because they've been waiting 3 weeks for a fix, yeah, they're angry, but mostly, they're desperate. Compassion here means surgically piercing through that aggressive threat to address the underlying desperation. It is a surgical tool, not a soft one. Which leads us to the big picture in Section 6, the compassionate system. Look, managers absolutely must ruthlessly audit their systems for anti-compassion incentives. If you have super strict handle time targets that actually penalize an agent for taking an extra minute to care, or if your QA scorecards value script adherence over a genuine human connection, well, you are actively training your team to prioritize speed over humanity. At that point, the system itself is broken. This difference becomes painfully obvious during an organizational crisis. Standard management usually just enforces strict metrics and manages from behind a closed door, which just skyrockets the stress. But compassionate leaders, they step up. They adjust expectations, they advocate for their team, and they make themselves visibly present on the floor. Just being there is a form of compassion. It protects your team's dignity when they're under fire. And as we look toward the future, please don't fear the rise of AI. The future of CX isn't about robots replacing human care. It's actually about automation handling all that easy transactional volume. And you know what that does? It frees up human capacity. So when a customer finally reaches a real person, that agent actually has the time and the energy for a genuine emotional connection. In this AI-driven world, human compassion becomes the ultimate, irreplaceable premium skill. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Will your very next interaction be just another transaction, or will it be a moment of genuine humanity? Compassion is a daily choice. You've got the framework, you understand the dimensions, and you know how to build the habits. Every single interaction is an open invitation to use it. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and here's to completely transforming how we connect with our customers.